We couldn't have asked for a better test match to mark the return of international cricket than what we saw in Southampton between West Indies and England, a test match that had many twists and turns. We're now ready for the second test match. That's what we'll be talking about. You're watching Maruti Suzuki Desire presents ESPNcricinfo Match Day. Right, so mark that date on your calendar, 16th of July, Thursday. That's the start of the second test match to be played in Manchester, Old Trafford. And conditions here in Manchester are expected to be quite different to what we saw in Southampton. Conditions might be different. The teams might change, but your host and your cricket pundit remain the same. I'm Nikhil Naz, joined by Daren Ganga. Daren, how are you doing? And I'm guessing, everyone's been cursing 2020 for the year that it's turned out to be. But that result in Southampton, has it helped make 2020 slightly better for you?
Indeed, I think Test cricket has taken a back seat in the West Indies because of how successful the West Indies team has been in T20 cricket. But that last victory against England has just brought the West Indian pride to the forefront in the longest version of the game. So a lot of West Indians were quite pleased and happy with what they saw on the field, and it really validated the sentiments echoed by Phil Simmons, the coach of the West Indies team, when he spoke about the preparation and him being optimistic about the team performing in that first test match. So he would be a pleased man, and I'm hoping from a West Indian perspective that they can ride that confidence into the second test.
Okay, let's now turn our attention to the 5 things that you really need to watch out for in the second test match. We'll start with point number 5, and that's can West Indies seal the series at Old Trafford? Something that Daren just alluded to. Now remember, West Indies haven't won a series in England since beating them in 1988. That's how far back you've got to go to see that. But here's something that will make every West Indian fan a bit optimistic. Take a look at the record of West Indies in Test cricket since 2015, and they tend to do rather well versus the English team. Now, they've got a winning percentage of roughly around 21% versus every other team. But you take a look at what they do against England, it stands at more than double of that at 50%. So clearly they enjoy playing the English team, and the results are testament to that. But do you think this time the West Indies can go all the way?
Well, what I could say is that, we've not had, a lot of times in our past, maybe in the last 5 to 7 years, where we've gone into a test series and won the first test match. If you look at what transpired in early 2019, the West Indies won that first test match of that series in the Caribbean and then went on to win the series. So from a West Indian perspective, it's always very important to start well in a series, and they've done that. So I think their chances are quite good. They will use that confidence well. I think acclimatization to the conditions before the start of this series would have done the West Indies team a whole lot of good. So I expect that they will produce another good showing in that Old Trafford test match.
For now, we'll take a look at our point number 4, and that's the stats here at Old Trafford. Now, win toss, bat first at Old Trafford. That should ideally be the mantra of the team winning the toss. That's because, take a look at those stats in the last 5 test matches. The average first inning scores, team batting first at 425, team batting second at 292. This is a contrast to what we saw in Southampton, where it was roughly the same. Whether you win the toss or you lose the toss, batting first, same, was roughly the same in terms of runs scored. Now, also the team batting first has won 3 times in the last 5 matches that have been played. And remember, every time that the team has won the toss, they have decided to bat first. Now, the other thing that's really different from Southampton, and something that I mentioned right at the start of the program, is how the pacers tend to perform when compared to the spin bowlers. In Southampton, we saw the average for spin bowlers slightly better. Here it changes. Now it feels like you're back to a typical English venue where the fast bowlers are averaging at 28.44, spinners there at 43.44. Okay, so clearly, looking at those stats, pacers tend to do rather well. So both teams also have a strong pace attack, so it's going to be a battle of that. We'll turn our attention now to point number 3. Will England now look to play Stuart Broad? And we'll give you some stats on that as well. Most wicket for England in the last 12 months, and there you have it, Stuart Broad right on top with 48 wickets in 12 matches. Though I would say you've got to take this stat with a pinch of salt, because Jofra Archer also is roughly the same. He's played less number of test matches, but the number of wickets he's picked is roundabout what Stuart Broad's strike rate is at the moment. The other thing is Jimmy Anderson is missing because he was injured, so he's not there. Darren, what I want to know from you is, after that or before the first test match, there was all this talk by Chris Silverwood as well that we will shuffle between a Mark Wood and Jofra Archer. They didn't do that. No one expected Stuart Broad to be dot. Do you think now they'll go back to that mantra that they mentioned at the start?
Well, firstly, Nikhil, I think it's important for teams to play to their strengths. Despite the statistics and the past performances at a particular venue, I think Stuart Broad in an England side is a more competitive unit. If you look at what transpired in 2019 in that first test match in Kensington Oval, they went for Sam Curran at the expense of Stuart Broad and lost that first test match of the series. And we all know how that series panned out. I think they made an error again in not playing Stuart Broad. He's such a dynamic player. The aura that he brings to that team can't be taken for granted. So I think they must play to their strengths. A team with the likes of Archer, Broad, and with Mark Wood is a formidable team.
Right, turning our attention to point number 2, and that is West Indies banking on Holder and Gabriel with the ball, taking a look at, best strike rate for bowlers since Jan 2018. We've got a bit of a cutoff there, minimum of 50 wickets, and Jason Holder on top. I'm not surprised because something we discussed about his strike rate, his average, in Test cricket being outstanding. So he's right on top. But what surprised me when I looked at that particular stat is Shannon Gabriel at the number 2nd spot with 59 wickets in the 14 matches that he's played. The other that make that list are Ishant Sharma, Kagiso Rabada, and Pat Cummins. In that sense, Darren, would you say with all the spotlight, has been on Kemar Roach, and then even the young Alzari Joseph as this young guy who's coming up, and then Gabriel stays under the radar. In that sense, is he underrated a bit too?
He is. I think Shannon Gabriel over the last, 2 or 3 years, he's been right up there with Kemar Roach and Jason Holder in terms of effectiveness with the ball for the West Indies. This group, we've said it before this test series, this is the strength of this West Indian team. They're now in a position where they can take 20 wickets and it's all up to their batting. If they can put 300 plus runs on the board, this West Indian side is going to be a very difficult side to beat.
That's correct. A difficult side to beat, West Indies. But if it makes things better for England, it's the return of Joe Root. We can't talk enough about his importance to the team. And that is our point number 1, Root boost for the wounded English team. He is that captain who leads from the front, gets you runs as well. The question, though, Darren, now is, him coming back, as you mentioned right at the program, that it's going to make a huge difference to the English team. But the question is, who does he replace? If we were to talk at the start of the first test match, probably Zach Crawley could have been the guy that goes out. Now, with that 70 odd that he got, looks like it would be Joe Denley that makes place for him.
Yeah, it's a tough decision for the England selectors. When you look at what transpired in that first test match, you're inclined to leaving the guy who didn't produce a lot of runs in that first test match. Ollie Pope didn't really score, but I think what England has done, they've invested in Joe Denley. And he hasn't really delivered. At 34 years of age, there are a lot of question marks around him and his future in an England setup. There's more of a tendency to go with the younger players like a Zach Crawley and to allow more continuity. So I think it's either of Zach Crawley, maybe Joe Denley, but, that's a tough proposition for the England selectors.
All right. Just a reminder to our viewers that we are recording this program before England have announced either their 12 or their 11. So that's why we're debating about, say, a Stuart Broad or Joe Denley or Zach Crawley. Thanks so much for joining us, Darren, with your thoughts. You were watching Maruti Suzuki Desire presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday.